Hey everybody, this is Cameron, and today I have the immense pleasure of discussing with one of David Lynch's former producers, Neil Edelstein. He is the producer of David Lynch's Lumiere short that you can find not only on the Lumiere and Company, but also on the short films of David Lynch here, as well as one of the producers of The Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, and another Naomi Watts classic, The Ring 1 and 2. So thank you, Neil. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just get started. How did you meet David Lynch?
I met David in 1992 when I was a production assistant, and I had moved to Los Angeles after university and was bouncing around people's couches. I didn't have a job yet, and I was trying to get any job in the industry. And I happened to work. I got called from a friend of mine who was a PA. His name's John Churchill, who later became very involved in David's life initially as assistant, then as assistant director. John Churchill called me and said, "Do you want to work on a music video? It's a one-day shoot on a Saturday. There's no money, but you'll be on a film set." To which I said, absolutely, because any job was a good job at the beginning for me because I had no connections. So I worked that free job, and it ended up being like 26 hours straight. And I was on a film set, which was awesome. I mean, it was a real kind of lowbrow, shitty music video, but it was work. Because I did that job, a week later, it may have been a few days later, I got a call from a woman who worked at a company called Propaganda Films. Propaganda Films was a huge music video commercial production company that has an illustrious history, and you can run down the list of incredible filmmakers that worked there, from David Fincher, Gore Verbinski, Michael Bay. The woman that worked there had called because her husband was involved in the production on the free job that I did. So all the PAs that did the free job were now getting a paid job through her at Propaganda, and it happened to be a David Lynch shoot, which was a PSA for breast cancer. So from that free job came the paying job. And that's when I first met David Lynch as a PA. His office, the music, that PSA for breast cancer awareness was shot at his office on Santa Monica Boulevard. And in the back of his office, he had a stage, which was really more like a garage. The ceiling was really low, but there was I remember there was speed rail and lights hanging. So it was almost like an insert stage. And I remember walking in the garage door. There was one of those big, industrial type garage doors, and David was sitting in a chair smoking a cigarette. And that's the first time I saw David and met him on that PSA.
Did you know it was going to be a David Lynch shoot prior to you getting there, or were you just told it's just a PSA for breast cancer awareness?
That's a great question. I don't recall. I think I would have known what it was. And I was already an invested David Lynch fan because I loved Twin Peaks. So when I went to university, I would record Twin Peaks on my VHS and come home and watch it on, I think it was Saturday night or whatever evening it was. So I was and of course I knew Blue Velvet. So, David Lynch was a known quantity to me and someone I really had admired.
Now, he had done commercials and music videos before. What kind of crew did he have for just a commercial like this? Is it just kind of a couple people? Does he have?
No. Well, it's never a massive crew, but it was his usual crew. So I'd kind of entered into the environment of people around him who are, like family. People like Scott Cameron, Corey Glazer, John Wentworth. At the time, his producer was a guy named Deepak Nayar, who's a great guy. They were all really a skilled, wonderful group of people, and I believe they were all from the Twin Peaks journey.
That's really interesting that he would just bring over a crew no matter what the project was.
Yeah. David was incredibly loyal, and like most filmmakers that get to continue to work, which is always hard to do, he wanted his people around because they were friends, family, and really skilled at what they did. So he had a great group around him.
So you work on this commercial. How does that take you to the Lumiere film a few years later?
Well, there's a lot of tread in there. I bounced around in commercials and music videos as a PA, cutting my teeth, kind of driving trucks, taking film to the lab, doing all the menial stuff a PA does. But it was a very fortuitous time because there was so much production because of music videos. MTV was at its height, and these music videos were like short films.
Right.
So you get on a music video, the budget could be $1 million, which was a lot of money at the time, or north of that. And so you're working a lot. I was, and I learned a lot. And so I kind of bounced around different production companies, a lot of really gifted, talented people at that time. Amazing people you work with. And I got to the point where I started production coordinating and production managing. I was just started to production manage. It was maybe a year and a half in, and I got a call one day and I had worked in David's camp as a PA and a coordinator on what may have been a Jill Sander commercial that was shot near LAX. They were building a highway out there. And I'd have to go back and look at the timeline on all this. But I got a call one day from Gay Pope, who was David's assistant, who's not with us anymore. She's an incredible person. And she said, David is shooting this short film for the Lumiere campaign, which I didn't know what that meant at the time. And he needs you to come to the house because he needs you to produce it. And literally, I remember answering the phone and I said, well, I can't produce yet. I don't have the experience. You had to be a PA, then a production coordinator, then a production manager, then you became a producer. There's a trajectory. There's a pecking order, right? You gotta cut your teeth. Well, I heard David in the background say, said something, and he grabbed the phone and he said, get up here right fucking now. Producing is way easier than production managing. You don't need to do that anymore. Come up here. You're going to produce this. And what I later realized was Deepak, who was his producer, was out of the country for a spell. He had gone back to India, which he would do go work there for periods of time. And so I kind of hung up the phone and was like, wow, at my age, in my mid-20s, to be producing for David Lynch was pretty incredible. And so I went up to his house, and then the Lumiere project was kind of presented to me as what it was. You get 3 strips of film, and these 2 Frenchmen come with the camera, which they had recreated, and you tell your story, and you get 3 shots at it. And David was selected amongst, I don't know what the number was, 35, 40 directors. And so that's how that came about. And it was probably one of the more gratifying endeavors in my adult work life. It remains so, because it was so simplistic, but so complex and brilliant, because it was David. When David passed, I went to these boxes that I have. And I have a lot of stuff in these boxes from those years when I worked with him. And I found a handful of Lumiere things, including behind the scenes footage of us shooting the takes,
Right.
the rehearsals, the set building, and a lot of stuff came flooding back. But what I've always had is a note that David wrote to me, which is on my X feed. You've probably seen it. It's framed. And it's the set layout of Lumiere that he drew. It's the set and it's the dolly track. And it says, to Neil from David. And he gave it to me and he said, go get this built. and we built it at Gary D'Amico's house. Gary D'Amico is David's visual effects, practical, effects expert, who's a great guy and so gifted. This guy could do anything. I recently talked to him. He's such a good guy. And we went up to his house. He lived up in Sunland, and he had this, he lived up in kind of like base of the mountains and kind of a valley, and he had a lot of land, and we built the set on his property. And I remember having it built and going out there and David coming out. And I remember the night before it was raining. And David called me and said, make sure those sets are covered. I remember calling Gary, and he had to find a lot of viz screen and cover the sets. But that's how that came about. That's how Lumiere came about. And it remains, I think, it's such an awesome film for what it is. It's pure Lynch, right?
Yeah. Now you get 3 strips. So how much rehearsal did you guys do for every shot, since there's only one take of it you can do?
Yeah, we did quite a bit of rehearsal. And I have that filmed, because it was really an orchestration of camera and a wipe device that was built in front of the camera, and then ultimately landing in front of a piece of flash paper, because the gig is a dolly, a camera moving left to right through these different environments. It's how silent films were made to a large degree, right? And you're stuck at a focal length, right? The camera's like locked, and you've got a lens that's old, and you're in a box creatively, which is brilliant. So David came up with the idea of, I'm going to cut in camera. I'm going to make my transitions happen in frame. And so you had to really orchestrate that and the timing of it and hit the marks. And so there was this anticipation, which was tremendous and fun and unique. You can experience it in other ways making movies, but this was really unique because you got 3 shots at it. And if you didn't get it, you were fucked. Excuse my French. Speaking of Lumiere. So there was a lot of rehearsal around it, and there were a ton of moving parts. And there was also actors who at the beginning, who were in this field, the 2 cops who had to race around the set to go to the door at the end. And then there's the woman who's in a kind of closer to frame. So it's like a medium, tighter shot in her home. She had to go all the way back around to the last set and sit in the set. So there was this orchestration between camera, a wiping device, so the effects, and then the actors, and of course, the timing of the camera hitting all these marks. It was pretty fantastic. It's really cool, and it worked. It worked to perfection.
You guys must have been on such a film high after you finished that shoot.
I think in doing it, you realize that you're doing something special, and it's not about money or the box office. It's about the art form. and you're working with someone like David Lynch, who you know is special. So you're just humbled to be involved and be there. And the rest is history. It's kind of magical in that way.
Now, you went from that to the Straight Story, or did you work a little bit on Lost Highway as well?
I had nothing to do with Lost Highway. Lost Highway was before my time, but that was a window of time when I was in David's universe, and and this predates my film involvement. So this may be before Lumiere, where David and I were working to start a gaming company and harness what was the beginning of the internet and figure out a way to break down the distribution models and deliver content directly to audiences. So the idea was YouTube in a way for David Lynch, way before YouTube existed. The pipe wasn't there.
Now, did he come to you with this idea? You come to him with this idea? Or is this something you guys were just talking about? And
I hate to say I came to him with any ideas because he's David Lynch. So, I introduced him to things, and we would spitball and talk about ideas and concepts and trying things, and I'd expose him to stuff the best I could. You got to be careful how you approach him with things because he's an artist, so you don't want to try to foist or David didn't want to be poisoned by other people's ideas. His creativity had to kind of come through his process, and you didn't want to introduce too much to him or bring things from the outside in an unorganic way because it could meddle with what he was doing creatively. So it was kind of like an alchemy in a way. So I was introducing things and talking about things, and there was movement to start a gaming company. We were influenced by some games, and we had conversations with some artists and creators, but it always got derailed because a movie would pop up. Or it was difficult to make deals. That was a large part of it. It was challenging to make deals.
Were these just like wholly original concepts? Was there talk about doing a Twin Peaks themed game at the time?
No, the Twin Peaks thing never arose. There was a project that David had called Woodcutters from Fiery Ships. That was something that was discussed. Ultimately, Dumbland came at the other end of this journey.
Okay. That wasn't a video game initially.
Yeah, but I mean, that was floating. There was always the idea of trying to figure out if Ronnie Rocket could fit into this mold. So it was trying to harness kind of the immersive gaming world with David Lynch and figure out how that could feather together. But it was always challenging because it's hard to get a deal done and movies get in the way. So there was a lot of energy spent. There were meetings, there were creative opportunities, and nothing really came to fruition, which is okay. It's good. It's fine. It's the journey.
So one day he comes to you and says he's going to make a film about an elderly man riding a lawnmower, and you're like, I'm in.
Well, at that point, myself, David, and Mary Sweeney had a company called The Picture Factory.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary Sweeney is largely responsible for the Straight Story getting made. I mean, that was her passion project. Right. She had gotten the rights to Alvin Wright's story. She had worked with a very gifted writer named John Roach, and they really nurtured that and got that, that was her baby. And that came through our company, The Picture Factory.
And so were you attached as a producer before David got involved, or?
Well, it was all kind of, we were all under one roof. So we would all work together on projects. So it was a Picture Factory production. Now I can't remember if that company has credit on the film. I don't know that it does. It might. I don't know. I haven't looked at the credits in a long time on that movie. So, but an incredible experience, right?
Right. I mean, personally, I think it's a complete masterpiece. But at the time, were you surprised that David was interested in directing it? Because
Yes.
I mean, you were.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. But telescoping out now, it's not much of a surprise at all, is it?
Right.
It kind of, the unorthodox nature of it perfectly makes sense because it's David Lynch. So
it also feels like, yes, it's this real person story, but David Lynch, it just seems like he infused so much of his own personal life growing up into it that it just feels like you're watching the real thing.
yes, I would agree with that. But also I think David was more in touch with the human condition and human emotions than most people. And he had a elegant, honest way to make those emotions work. And you can see it in all of his movies. But if you look at a movie like The Elephant Man, there's a lot of similar themes and tones and emotions between that and The Straight Story. Different movies, of course, but playing in the same zone. And he was a master at that. So I think that you look at The Straight Story now, it made perfect sense.
And what was your experience with Richard Farnsworth? I mean, the man just...
Richard Farnsworth was a great guy. I mean, he was in ill health. He was suffering from cancer. The guy was a warrior, you know. So
he was able to make that dialogue just seem so pure. Like it was just,
yeah.
It just, yeah. I mean, there are, like, there might be just a shot of him just sitting on a chair, talking to that young woman who's pregnant, and it's just you feel like it feels like one of your grandparents talking to you in such a wonderful, I dare not meaning simplistic as just, I just mean like it's just pure. It's pure emotion, and it's like what somebody would say to somebody, and it just knocks you back, like, because you've never been confronted with this kind of emotion directly being put at you.
Yeah. Well, and it's all the components that make the movie work, right? It's such a unique texture, right?
I mean, it's the writing, it's the directing, it's got bad
yeah, and you're enveloped in this environment that's really kind of foreign in a way. Like, you don't see this landscape a lot in movies. You certainly don't see it in a David Lynch film. So it just all worked.
Now, were you on location with them the whole time, or were you back?
I was there, not the whole time, but I was there at the beginning and at the end. Okay. So I came and went. I was there at all the end, the last few days, which was fantastic stuff. And it was, there's so many great stories around the making of that film. I mean, one great story or just aspect of it is Freddie Francis, who was at the end of his career. It was the last movie he shot, who was just, the guy's a legend.
Yeah.
What can you say? Such a gentleman. And the stories were incredible. We talked to him about working on the Hammer films, and he directed some really cheesy Hammer films, and we had just nonstop laughs about that. And he pulled focus on the Red Shoes. He worked with the Archers. He worked on Black Narcissus. So, like Freddie Francis, the guy's a legend. But so there was the making of the movie, but there was also the conversation with people like a Freddie Francis that are, you kind of like feel blessed to be in these environments and talking to these people, especially if you love movies and you're making them.
Well, also having Jack Fisk there, of course, is a longtime friend of Lynch. It just feels like the whole film with Freddie Francis is like a giant homecoming in a way.
Truly great. You talk about a crew of superstars. Wow. I mean, Jack Fisk is, look at his set at the end, right? The set is just spectacular. So it's such a character in the movie.
So since Lynch shot it more or less in chronological order, what was it like shooting in Lawrence, Iowa? Was that a nice place to?
I don't know that I was in Lawrence, Iowa. I maybe was at the beginning. I don't recall. I remember being in the rural parts and out in the country and being at the bit at the end when he lands at his brother's house, which I believe may have been on the border of Wisconsin and Iowa. It may have been into Wisconsin. So I don't know that I was there at Lorenz. I'm not sure. I know I flew into Chicago and had driven.
Okay.
So
now, are there like hotels around those areas? Like, where's the crew stay in the middle?
Oh yeah.
Of
rural, very rural hotels.
Okay.
Yeah. Very rural, but good.
Oh yeah. Every time I see that film, I want to just not get on a lawnmower, but I want to just take that drive. You know, it looks beautiful. So.
Yeah. Yeah. The landscape is, it's perfectly, I feel it's perfectly represented in the movie. It's a beautiful 1-to-1. And I think that's to David and Freddie, of course, how they captured that is, you know, on one hand, it could seem rather mundane and simplistic, but they were able to, they're artists, they're geniuses.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were able to make simplicity into poetry, in my opinion.
Correct. Perfect way to state it.
Now, David has said that the initial cut he made of the Straight Story had a little bit more humor to it than the final film, even though I do think the final film has a lot of humor in it.
Yeah.
Do you remember seeing those initial?
I do. You know, I remember seeing a cut of the movie that was dry. There was no sound. I don't even think there was temp. And I thought it was just dreadful. It was just boring as hell. It was so boring. I was like watching paint dry. And then the score got laid in.
Mm-hmm.
Enter the genius of David Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti.
Right.
And the movie just
takes off.
You know, I vaguely remember the cuts that were a little more, there was more humor in it. I vaguely remember those cuts, but I couldn't tell you with fine detail what was in there. I remember the iterations. To me, the biggest thing again was the score being laid in versus when it wasn't there. That was big.
Yeah. Well, John Carpenter has said, you know, that watching Halloween without the score, people were like, "This isn't scary at all."
No. Yeah, sound design and score are what everything in a movie, right?
I just want to say that I was a manager at a movie theater that played The Straight Story, and I've said this before, but I would like to say it to you. That film, I'm sure you've heard it by other people. It caused tremendous healing. There were so many people that came out of that movie theater, and even though, you know, there wasn't cell phones, people were talking in the lobby about how they were going to go home and make a call to a family member they hadn't talked to in a while.
That's awesome. That's the ultimate compliment, right?
And we played that movie 4 or 5 times a day, and it was every screening.
Yeah. And that's the highest compliment, right? I mean, that's what more can you ask for?
Yeah. And I remember people were saying, David Lynch, Disney, what is? And I said, listen, this is not, you know, a director for hire thing, even though obviously he didn't nurture the script. He, you know, took Mary and John's script, but still it was, you know, it was a film that then Disney put their name on it. It wasn't like David Lynch was going to make, you know, The Black Cauldron or something.
Correct. Yeah. And you wonder today if Disney would touch that film.
I made a joke to someone the other day that with today's climate, with the ratings board, it would be rated R for smoking.
Yeah, and maybe it'd be rated R for someone on a lawnmower that's gas operated. Another no. God forbid. Yeah.
Yeah.
It probably would. They put a warning label on it. This guy rode a
Yeah.
gas lawnmower, which is just
Yeah.
fucking absurd. But you're not off about the smoking.
Yeah. I love this picture, by the way. This is the Disney
Yeah.
DVD, but I kept it just because of Lynch's
Yeah.
photograph here.
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you something funny about the one sheet for that movie. I mean, this may be common knowledge, but the one sheet of Alvin riding the lawnmower with
I have it right there.
silhouette. Yeah. That's not Alvin. That's not Farnsworth.
Richard Farnsworth. Who is it?
It's the double.
Okay.
It's the double.
It's a beautiful shot.
It truly is. You can hide a lot with a silhouette.
Absolutely.
And a cowboy hat. Yeah.
So okay, I have to ask you this just because I talked with Sabrina a while ago about this, and she mentioned that Disney seems very reluctant to putting this out in 4K or any sort of physical media post the DVD here in the States. Now, other countries like Australia has a Blu-ray. In Europe, they have a 4K, so there is a 4K master of it. What do you know about this? Are we ever? I mean, it's on Disney Plus in 4K. So,
I know nothing of it. Nothing. I'm sure they're not going to spend one thin dime doing anything. And now that David's gone, I'd be very, hesitant to recommend anyone touch it unless you can conjure up David and Freddie Francis, because someone will fuck it up. So, I don't know what the contractual language is around it either in terms of his involvement, but Disney's not going to do anything because
you don't think they would want to capitalize on the fact that he passed? No. Okay.
I could be wrong, but I doubt it.
Well, here's the good news: the 4K is region free, so you can't import it and play it on your U.S. players. But
cool. I wonder who mastered it at 4K. It's interesting.
I think it was David and Sabrina who did it.
Oh, but Disney. So it exists, but Disney won't put it out.
It exists overseas. I believe without, or maybe it's not Disney doing the distribution overseas. It's somebody else doing it. But for whatever reason, they're not releasing it here, even though they have the 4K master. Yeah.
Don't hold your breath.
Great.
Yeah. But if there was ever a time, now's it. So maybe we'll get lucky.
I mean, I'm hoping Criterion can get a hold of it, and since
maybe we'll get lucky.
Yeah. So after the Straight Story, Mulholland Drive for ABC kind of came on like right away, right? It was pretty much back to back.
Mulholland Drive was gestating for a while. There was a lot of hesitation for David to get back into television. Mm-hmm. Myself and Tony Krantz, Tony was David's agent at CAA and largely instrumental in the Twin Peaks deal. This is before my time. Mm-hmm. But Tony was a very successful agent at CAA and was David's agent. And Tony had graduated on or had moved on to being the head of television at Imagine Television. And Tony and I were constantly separate and together, nudging David to get back into television. And through this process came Mulholland Drive. And how long this went on, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. It must have been over a year that we were chipping at him. And ultimately, we went to dinner at a place called Orso. I doubt it's there. It was on 3rd Street, right behind New Line, near Cedar Sinai. There was an outdoor area that you'd sit out. It was a fantastic restaurant. I think I saw like Billy Wilder there once. Like it was incredible. The people that come in and out of there. So we had dinner there one night, and David agreed to do Mulholland Drive. But Tony Krantz had navigated a deal at ABC for a pilot, which meant that they had to greenlight a pilot that David wrote and shoot it. Right? Like it wasn't going to be like a hemming and hawing over the script. It was, this is the script. We are greenlighting this. And so that's how it came about. That's a truncated version of what happened.
Now, you said that when you were dealing with David with the gaming that you didn't want to push him too far in this direction. So with Mulholland Drive, how were you guys kind of encouraging him to move in this
I
direction?
think it was just, let's get back into television and tell a story. And, we had grandiose plans to bring in people. David and I were going to bring in people like Quentin Tarantino and Bryan Singer at the time. David and I did a meeting with Bryan Singer. We were going to bring all these people in to direct the episodes. We were, and they all would have done it. They were lined up. So we just wanted to do something really what you'd expect of David doing television again, but in a different flavor than Twin Peaks. And so that's how it came about. I mean, that's the truncated version.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned Bryan Singer and Tarantino, did you guys ever meet with J.J. Abrams? Because Justin Theroux looks a lot like him in the movie.
No. I don't know where he was at that.
It was right between Felicity and Alias. So
yeah, I don't think we did, but it's funny you say that because I remember the Alias script floating around as an example of something we should look at for some reason. I had that script at that window of time, but we did not meet with him. But maybe it would have came to be. I mean,
I never thought about it until I did a rewatch of Mulholland Drive a few years ago, and when Justin's sitting there watching the 15 Reasons, musical group, and he's smoking and he's blowing the circles, and the producers come up and he goes, "This is the girl." I'm looking at him going, he looks so much like J.J. Abrams right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, when they were shooting this, it was right around the Alias time, so I wasn't sure.
That scene was shot at Paramount, I think, on stage 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure.
It's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. That was a treat to be on that lot. No, but that's how it came to be. That's how the pilot, David wrote the pilot rather quickly.
Now, when you got the script and you're going to be one of the producers on it, and you read it, are you kind of like, okay, let's go? Or were you just like,
oh yeah,
what is this?
No, you are like, this is going to be incredible, because we would talk about where it was going after this. Mm-hmm. You could see the through line and the threads, and David wouldn't give up too much, but you talk about a little bit of it,
Because I had heard that Justin Theroux's character was going to be perhaps moving into the apartment complex where Betty was, and so they were going to sort of have their eye locking that they would have in the pilot would kind of become a meet cute later.
I don't know about that, but there was a character who was his gardener. Mm-hmm. And he was like kind of a mysterious Asian guy. It's like a Japanese gardener. Mm-hmm. And that character would have became like a key character in Justin's arc as a kind of interesting mystic, kind of like really would have been fun and cool. Now, ABC was very offended by that character. They thought it was stereotyping. And, I have the ABC notes, which are unbelievably fucking stupid at the time, because they were things like that. Oh, cut this character because it's stereotypic or racist that is a Japanese guy doing the garden. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Didn't they read the script?
Well, of course they read the script, but they wait for their time to give you their incompetent notes.
It's like they greenlight you to make an elephant. You make an elephant, and then they go, you know what? Why can't this be a giraffe?
You have to, whenever you're taking money from people who are the bank, you've got to be respectful and play ball, because it's their money. It's a business. But to your point, you're getting into business with David Lynch. You read the script, but they wait till later to start. I mean, and I don't mean to make a meal out of that one thing, but it's an example of a laundry list of issues that they had that are unfortunate because, well, listen, it ended up for the best.
Sure.
Because the movie got made.
Right.
The ending was shot and the movie was completed. But there was so much potential in what was set up in a pilot, which is a limited amount of time, of course, a finite amount of time. But there was this seeding of characters and things and ideas that would have blossomed into what I thought would have been a show at the caliber of what Twin Peaks was.
I mean, I love the film. That being said, sometimes I do wish I could step into an alternate universe and see what a complete season of Mulholland Drive would look like.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been. I think it would have been. Well, it. No one will ever know, but I think it would have been equally as successful as what the film has become. I mean, the film has taken on a life of its own. It's kind of surreal that it's.
I mean, it's routinely voted one of the best movie of the 21st century.
I mean, it makes sense in a lot of ways because David in the movie is just infused with his magic. Like, you can't. No one can make a movie like that. So I understand, and it's such a beautiful journey. But the show as its one season would have been incredible, incredible.
Yeah, and like to think that Naomi Watts would have been a television star instead of a film star.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
There would have been no Peter Jackson King Kong for her if she had
no, nor The Ring.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that.
We will get to that. Yes.
Yeah, I love the film. What did you? Okay, so there's three, as far as I'm aware, there's three versions of Mulholland Drive. There's the 2-hour pilot that was constructed for ABC. Then ABC went in and asked you guys to cut 30 minutes out, which David reluctantly did and disowned. And then there's the final theatrical cut. What did you, when you saw that initial 2-hour pilot, were you like, this rocks. Let's go.
I don't remember the specific cut, although I believe I have it in VHS form. I need to transfer it.
Please.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, I want to touch the thing. It's David Lynch.
And the Club Silencio stuff was shot, but it wasn't in that 2-hour pilot. It was, I heard it was being molded for kind of a European release.
I don't know. I don't remember that. I don't know if that's accurate. I think it was. I don't remember any cutting for ABC. I remember a meeting and notes and David Lynch in that meeting with a shit ton of executives basically saying fuck off to them.
Yeah.
He didn't literally say that, but that was,
the tone.
Vintage David, like, and not budging. So I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look and see what I have, but I do not remember a cut that ended up changing at the behest of ABC.
No, I just meant like the Club Silencio sequence was shot, but it wasn't included in that 2-hour cut because it was being saved for a potential European release of the pilot, sort of like what they did with Twin Peaks, where they shot it.
I don't know if that's accurate. Is that a rumor?
No, it's. I mean, it's been told to me by a few people that seem to know what they're talking about. But I mean, obviously, you were there, so I'm just asking.
I was there, but I'm foggy on stuff like that. I would have to go back and look if I have a track record on that.
Were you there? Were you there for the shoot of Mulholland Drive? Oh yeah,
every day, every second, I was on the set of Mulholland Drive. Yeah.
This seems like it would have been just absolutely incredible to be there. There's so much magic in every sequence.
Oh, it was so fun. I can't even describe how hilarious it was. The scene in the seedy office where the woman's vacuuming and she gets shot through the wall shooting that, we were in stitches on the floor dying laughing. Everybody, the actors included. You read it and you're like, how are we going to pull this off? Well, David pulls it off to perfection. And, you're giggling like you're teenagers.
Yeah. It's high comedy.
High comedy. And so I really think in essence, like, well, that scene alone that's working with David Lynch.
Right.
And you could probably, there's a long line of people that can attest to that experience of working with him. But being on the set of Mulholland Drive was incredible because it's such a varied landscape, storytelling and environments and characters and it just was, every day was a fresh new day.
Yeah.
There was no redundancy. Right.
And the cast is just game. I mean,
everybody was in their sweet spot. Everything worked to perfection. Joanna Ray, who's the casting director, deserves so much credit for that. For assembling that cast, and the choices are incredible. Jack Fisk again, Peter Deming. I mean, it's just everything working to perfection. David casting Angelo, right? Like there's so many beautiful things that you just knew would turn out to be what they are today. Easter eggs, just fantastic stuff. It's just surreal to have been there and be involved with it and have your name on it. It's incredibly humbling.
Plus, you got to shoot in downtown LA instead of going out into the rural parts of Wisconsin.
Yeah. Downtown LA was a treat. I remember there was a guy down there who owned all the parking lots, and we had to pay him. He was a character, that guy. That just came back to me.
I've walked a few of the
he would own, and you had to pay him off and grease him to get into these parking lots.
Yeah, I was gonna say I walked some of the locations downtown, and first of all, it's very hard to park down there, but when you do, it's very expensive, but it's just so cool to see the layout of this is where Adam attacked the car with the golf club. Oh, and then here's the outside of Club Silencio out here. It's like
which is the back. The outside of Club Silencio is the back of a theater.
Yeah,
where there was a parking lot there, which the guy owned.
Okay,
of course.
Yeah. But it's just so, I always find it so interesting when I see locations that David Lynch shot at, because he's so practical about having things relatively close together so that the crew doesn't have to move that far, when it's convenient to do so,
Correct. And you had to be that way, you had to be, because that's how you're efficient. You can't have big company moves. Like the scene at the table where it's Angelo in the espresso shop, that was right across the street from Club Silencio.
Right.
In some real mundane office building, just went in. I don't know how much dressing went into that room. It was probably no dressing. The table was there. Probably
Well, sometimes David would just walk in and look at a location and be like, this is perfect. Like, and I have a friend that went and saw the locations of Blue Velvet relatively close to when they shot, and he got into one of the people's houses where they shot Jeffrey's house, and the interior was exactly the same curtains, the same table, the same chairs, and it just seemed like Lynch just said, come on in, shoot the scene, and we left.
Genius. That house is probably a museum now.
Yeah, probably. But it's just I find it so interesting that he would make specific things and or change everything or change nothing.
Everything's completely manufactured from the ground up, or just go into the environment and own it.
Right, exactly. Now there's something I would love to talk with you about, because it's something that I've never heard anybody discuss, and that is you were instrumental in making David Lynch accessible to the internet by bringing davidlynch.com to fruition. How did that all happen?
I remember buying the URL for davidlynch.com, which I may have the paperwork on that. This was dial-up AOL era stuff.
Yeah.
Like there was nobody really thinking it was going to get to where we are today. Well, I guess there were people that realized it, but in terms,
I remember there were the little dots on the homepage, and I would click the dot and go, another title would come up. And that's where I purchased the short films of David Lynch collection.
I love that cover. I've never even seen that.
Yeah, he released this, and then the Eraserhead 2000 box.
Awesome. Yep. That's fantastic stuff.
All right. So how did all that happen? How did you convince him to go on the internet?
Well, there wasn't much convincing. It goes back to this gaming thing where we had this window of time where we're like, hey, let's pioneer and try to figure out ways to do something different. Let's get your movies out. Like, who wants to deal with distribution and marketing and all these headaches, because you lose control and you have less power and it costs a shit ton of money. And so we were just trying to pioneer, and I had his blessing to go and try to hustle and do things. And the agents, he wasn't really at an agency then. I think maybe he was at the time it might have been Endeavor. They just started, and just trying to just open doors and meet people and talk and discuss. And David's a magnet. Like, people want to be in business with him. So he gave me the freedom to try to, knock down those doors and do stuff. It was, you can look back and see how we got where we are today because of the computer chip. But I think the thought was way ahead of its time, because at the end of the day, you were still in an analog world with film. And until the digital cameras got to where they are, and we all have cameras on our phone now, it was always going to be a challenge, because you still had to shoot film, and there were no cameras that were digital per se. And so, but that's how DavidLynch.com came about,
Now, were you involved with any of those short films he was making for DavidLynch.com, like Rabbits? And
that stuff was after my time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you splinter off from him then?
After Mulholland Drive, David came to me and he said, you should get out of here. And I kind of read the writing was on the wall, because it was a transition time for him. And he said, I don't think I'm going to make a movie for a long time. And I didn't really pry and ask why. And he really hasn't made a movie since then, a feature, right? Since Mulholland Drive, there really hasn't been a David Lynch feature. There's been a lot of work, but he said, you got to go out and do your own thing now and take these projects. We had a bunch of projects in development. One being The Big Blow, which I later set up with Ridley Scott, which is at Disney now. It was at Fox. That almost came close to getting made. It was a short story written by Joe Lansdale. It's a project I still love. I still try to get stuff made. That's something in my in my array. And so I kind of left, and that following week, I got a call from Mike McCary, who was an executive at Fine Line. He had sent me The Ring a year and a half prior for David to direct.
The Ring for David Lynch to direct?
He sent me Ringu. Yeah, he sent me the Japanese version. Mike McCary, who was my partner, still is on many projects, who's a great guy, a very good executive. He was an executive at Fine Line, New Line, and he would travel the globe acquiring movies for distribution for Fine Line. And he had seen The Ring in Korea, South Korea, at a film festival. And he convinced his boss, which was ultimately Bob Shea at the time, to option The Ring as a remake. And McCary sent the tape to me for David to direct. Said, would David Lynch direct a Japanese horror film as a remake? I said, send me it. I would read or watch anything. And McCary sent it to me, and I watched it. It was a VHS. It was sent to my house. And it was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And I love horror films. Mm-hmm. And it scared the hell out of me, that movie. Part of it certainly was it was on half inch, and it was a shitty copy. So it added to the mystique of it.
Right.
And I remember going to David the day or two later and saying, hey, I watched this really scary movie. Would you do a Japanese remake? He said, no fucking way, man. Am I doing a Japanese horror film remake?
It's already kind of dictated what it is. But let me just pause for a second.
Yeah.
The idea potentially of David Lynch directing the Ring remake with Naomi Watts is insane.
Yes, it is. Naomi piece I'll walk you through, but that would have, I don't know if she would have been in it with David Lynch, but maybe she would have, but and listen, the movie The Ring ended up with the best director possible for it because Gore Verbinski is a genius in his own right.
That movie is so intense and scary.
Yes. Yes. That is Gore Verbinski, who is, I'm not comparing him to David Lynch. David Lynch is David Lynch, but Gore Verbinski is wickedly talented in a whole nother realm of talent. Not comparing, because David is like an icon. But
the man was able to take a Disney theme ride and turn it into one of the most financially successful franchises of all time.
That movie, Pirates of the Caribbean, is like one of a handful of, to me, perfect examples of where Hollywood is meeting its promise of entertainment, right? Like a movie as pure entertainment. That's great. Not just a shitty, big, dumb action movie, which can be great too, but not great like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Especially when you're coming off, I'm not trying to knock it because I know there's fans, but like things like Cutthroat Island and Waterworld, and then you see Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's like, this is just pure entertainment, and it's Johnny Depp taking chances, and just
it is the pinnacle. You may look back on it one day and be like, this is a pinnacle moment for Hollywood, and maybe it started going down after that. I mean, that's a little bit, that may not be perfectly accurate, but that movie is phenomenal. But back to The Ring. So McCary calls me the Monday after. David's like, hey, time for you to move on, Neil. And he says, hey, I was at home. And he said, I just got fired in the AOL Time Warner merger. But I was able to get The Ring as a 6-month severance to remake it. So McCary said, fuck the money, give me the movie wisely. And he said, would you produce it with me? Because I have no producing experience. And I said, are you kidding me? 1000%. And so we ended up hiring Bender Spink as our management team, and Roy Lee was there as like an assistant or doing something. I don't know what Roy was doing. McCary and Roy Lee were really good friends, no more. I mean, The Journey of the Ring is a book unto itself, which McCary and I have talked about writing. We've actually been approached to write the book, but we haven't come to any kind of we can't wrap our head around it. It's a fucking journey, man. And so McCary and I took it out. It was a 1/2 inch with Bender Spink, and we went to I think we went to 26, 27 buyers. Everyone passed except for, initially, DreamWorks passed. There was an executive there who watched it and said, it's better off as an urban movie. I remember this vividly. I still have the list. It's better off as an urban movie. We're not going to make it here. I'm like, okay. Everyone passed. Then a few days later, Walter Parks, who was running DreamWorks, surfaced and wanted to buy the movie. But at this point, Disney had stepped up. There was an executive at Disney named Jeff Clifford, really great executive. And he had gone away on a weekend retreat, one of these retreats that they do. I've never been on one of these things. Thankfully, I'm sure they do all kinds of, fall into people's arms and shit like this. I never went. I've never been in so he went to one of these retreats, and the mandate was, we need to get remakes and do remakes. So Disney comes out of nowhere because he came back and wanted to buy it. But we ended up at DreamWorks, for better or for worse. And so Gore Verbinski comes on because he had a deal there. And just fast forward a little bit through the development of it all, they started going to actresses. And the first actress they went to was Drew Barrymore. Well, we went to was Drew Barrymore.
Mhm.
And I said to Gore, you should see Mulholland Drive. It wasn't out yet.
Mhm.
We should cast Naomi Watts. He's like, well, how do I see it? So I went to David's house and I got the print. The movie was not released. And we screened it at a place called Sunset Screening Room. Sorry, I'm rolling around here.
That's all right.
Trying to make sure my TV in the background isn't ruining the screen. So I screened Mulholland Drive. McCary was there. Me, McCary, and Gore at Sunset Screening Room. Do you know where that is?
No.
It might still be there. It's at the base of one of these buildings on Sunset Boulevard. I think it
Okay.
might be the Equinox building or somewhere around there. And Gore watched it and was like, holy shit. I'm going to cast Naomi Watts. And I talked to Naomi and said, you know, I got her the movie. And I said, I'm trying to make this happen. Like there was conversation there. And Gore went back to the studio. And I remember I had to get a 1/2 inch to the studio and they watched it. They didn't care for it. I don't think they watched it, but you know, you get a studio executive and studio people watching a David Lynch movie, you know, it's challenging. So they kept going down a list and kept getting passes. And Gore put his foot down, to his credit. And I think he went to Steven Spielberg and just said, I want Naomi Watts. And that's how it came to be.
And of course, Steven is a big fan of David Lynch, and he
yeah.
also had been approached initially to direct the season 2 opener for Twin Peaks. But David, of course, was like, no, I'm going to do it. But Steven Spielberg could have directed an episode of Twin Peaks, which is fascinating. So, I mean, yeah, so it makes sense that they would be like, yeah, of course. I mean, and to have it, I thought it was very smart for her to be in that film coming right off Mulholland Drive, because it just felt like there was so much goodwill from Mulholland Drive that the audience just wanted to go with her on another journey right away.
Naomi Watts is we know that she's an incredible actress.
Right.
And I think she had kicked around Hollywood working very hard to build her career before Mulholland Drive and had some miscues, not based on her performance, but just being in movies that didn't work, whatever they may have been, but always a strong, incredible performance.
Yeah. So how did you convince her to do Ring 2?
Well, it wasn't much of a convincing because she didn't want to do it, but she was legally obligated to do it.
Got it.
And so she did not want to do it. And there's a story behind that I'll save for a later day. But I got phone calls from some very powerful people that there was, you know, she didn't have a choice, which is not a great thing because she's a wicked, talented, hard worker and a great person. But, you know, when you sign a contract and you've got the sequel language, it's hard to get out of that stuff. Very hard. So she had to do it. Yeah, that's Ring 2.
Well, the good news is that on this Blu-ray here, or I'm sorry, this 4K, Ring 2 actually has like a longer director's cut, which I had never seen before.
Of Ring 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't waste your time.
Okay. it's like another 30 minutes longer, and I heard it was better, but I haven't watched it yet. But
yeah,
I just remember the infamous deer scene in that.
Yeah, from horses to deer.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and you know, we're here to talk about David Lynch, but
sure.
Back to Gore Verbinski. I mean, that the horse scene is all Gore's doing. I mean, that is all Gore. I mean, that you watch that scene, which I'm sure has been studied. If it hasn't, you know, I'm sure people break that scene down. They should. I mean, holy smokes! What I mean, that's like pure genius cinema. What he did with that sequence.
Yeah. So you move on to other projects. Did you ever come back in touch with David Lynch over the years?
Yes, I would always talk to David. You know, we'd speak and communicate. I went on to do, as the years went by, I went on to do this app series that I produced and directed called Haunting Melissa, and I had kind of learned with these programmers, you know, how apps work. And it was back to where David and I were in 2000 about being able to distribute direct. And David and I had talked about a project for him to do, which did not come to fruition. I believe the Twin Peaks. I don't know where it was in the Twin Peaks. I candidly don't know. He wanted to do it, and we talked about it, but it didn't come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And then we continued to talk over the years about certain things and communicate. And you know, whenever there were interview requests or talking about things, I would always want to make sure I spoke to him first. There was a book that was written a few years ago. That's his biography, where you know he would write a chapter and then there'd be a chapter. It was that kind of two-fisted autobiography, you know. And I talked to him around that, and then you know there were other conversations, and yeah. Love David's. Whew.
I just remember the time at Inland Empire, he would say, now with digital cameras, the revolution can kind of start. We can make whatever we want now. And then there was a 10-year gap. So,
you know, knowing David, as we all know him, it's out there. He was constantly creating and doing something.
Right.
Whether it was painting or building furniture or doing his videos to YouTube, constantly doing something and dreaming and creating stuff for sure. So he wasn't sitting idle. And I'm sure we're going to see what the fruits of those years were. But I'm sure there were frustrations, because everybody's frustrated to some degree trying to get a project made, unless you're Steven Spielberg or, you know, somebody at that high caliber. But also David, I'm sure he had opportunities. He could have directed a movie every year if he wanted to, but he would never compromise on his vision, nor would he put himself in a position where other people dictated how he was going to make something, or how the budget was going to be, or what he could or could not do, or what the cut of the movie was. So he stuck to his moral compass and never, in my experience, ever deviated from that, because he learned the hard way, which was on Dune. He got burned. In Twin Peaks, he was burned. The first one, I think he felt burned by that. I know. I talked to him about it. So, you know, David is a model for never compromising. Very few people can be in that position, though, because the cost of it is that you don't work sometimes.
Right.
But he was doing, you know, he was down in that shop building furniture or painting.
Oh, of course.
Something. So,
of course. It's just 10 years is a long time not to.
It is. You know, and really, in my mind, he never made a movie since Mulholland Drive that was theatrically released.
Well, Inland Empire did play in theaters.
Yeah, I guess. But did it start as a feature film? Was it a feature film? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, there was no actual, like, you know, script. It was sort of created day by day as they were working on it.
Jazz. You know, it's like jazz, right? Like,
right.
But that's still not a lot of output. We don't, selfishly, as fans of David Lynch, we would want to see every 2 to 3 years a movie.
My only pushback to that would be, well, Twin Peaks: The Return is like 17 hours. I mean,
that's fair.
So, I mean, it's not like he just came out with like 1 more 2-hour thing. I mean,
that's fair.
17 hours is a lot of time.
I think David Lynch in a box of a 2-hour window or an hour and a half window, 2 hours, is a special box. And that's where you get the magic of a movie, because of the time constraint.
Right.
So when you get 17 hours of David Lynch, sure, we'll love it. We'll eat it up.
Right.
But it's a different thing.
Right.
That 2-hour window of David Lynch is where you end up with the magic of The Elephant Man, The Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, you know, Blue Velvet, obviously. Like, it's a 3-act-ish structure, but it's got a beginning and a middle and end in the way that David Lynch is going to deliver it, right?
Right.
That is the magic. It's hard to wrap your arms around 17 hours because it's like snippets of things and tone. You know what I mean? It's more of a tonal play. So you just wish there were more movies, but you know, what are you going to do? It is what it is. So,
well, we're all going to look back at his output and just, you know, I mean, just each film, I kind of think of him, you know, as a different artist, but similar to Kubrick, in which each film, there's so much in each one
Oh,
that
it's
that
forever.
that we're going to be discussing them forever. So,
Forever. David lives forever. I mean, he is his he is in his work more than most filmmakers,
right,
obviously.
right,
And as you said, Kubrick is someone of that caliber. But David is his signature is so unique.
yeah.
It keeps him alive in my mind.
Hmm. That's why, there'll never be, even if a film evokes it, there'll never be a David Lynch film again, because it was David Lynch who made that film. I mean,
Correct.
yes, he had a lot of wonderful people working around him that helped contribute to that. But it's just, you could look at one frame of The Straight Story and know David Lynch made it, even though it's not a film that he normally would
Correct.
make, right?
Correct. Correct. It's partially the magic of the human soul and the person crafting it, and it's partially the tools of making movies and how he utilized them. But he was an auteur
Hmm.
to he's the definition of an auteur. Um, and you never make a movie alone. Maybe these days you can more so because of technology. But a David Lynch movie is not made in a vacuum. He's working with a lot of gifted, talented people, but very few filmmakers have more control over every aspect of the movie than David
Hmm.
Lynch, because he knew camera cold, he knew editing cold, he knew sound design cold, he knew music cold, he performed all of it, and he knew exactly what he wanted. Not a lot, very, very few filmmakers are like that. We know this. It's just reality.
Some
You know,
filmmakers just send their movie to post and they go direct something else.
sure. And I know there's some talented people that do that.
Sure.
Not everybody can be David Lynch or will be like David Lynch. It would get very boring, or maybe it wouldn't.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, everybody's different, but it's
Yeah.
just, it's, but I tend to lean towards the filmmakers that kind of want to see their work finished all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, because that's the art form. That's the purest sense of cinema and movie making is it's a director's medium. And that person has their fingerprints all over every inch of it, and they know all the aspects of making the movie. And it's like a child to them, right? That you birth and then put out into the world. And you don't put that child out into the world until you've raised that child and you feel they're ready to go out into the world. So, for David, that was without question his standard and his approach. For David Lynch to hand a movie to somebody else, I mean, there's no fucking universe that's happening. No way.
Well, we've seen the results of when that has happened. It doesn't end up well. So,
No, no.
so when you look back on your experience working with him, or just even knowing him, like, obviously reading your X account, you're posting so many wonderful things. It just seems like this wave of like good memories are washing over you, and you're sharing it
Always,
with all of us, and it's beautiful. So thank you.
always. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, there was never a bad moment working with David Lynch or being around him. For me personally, he made my career. I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for him. Um, and he did so much for me. He's a great guy, kindest person. He is so unique. There's no one like him. He could have been like pumping gas at a gas station and he'd still be a unique, incredible person.
Mhm.
There's something about his soul. But it was pure bliss working with David Lynch and being around him. You're laughing all the time. You're having a blast. You're working on things that are special. He's surrounded by great people. I mean, come on. It's like, uh, it's humbling. And it's, for me personally, I can't really put it into words because it feels like surreal, because how many people get to have their name and be involved in a movie like Mulholland Drive? Come on.
Or the
Like,
Straight Story.
or The Straight Story, or Premonitions Before an Evil Deed, or whatever other stuff we worked on, the commercials, the Yoshiki music video, the other concepts. It's like you're working with like David Lynch, come on, it's amazing. So I have nothing but fond memories. He's got great kids. Everyone around him's fantastic. There was never anything that ever rose to the level of negativity or darkness or conflict in my experience. So
He's
I'm just
yeah, he also seems like somebody who could probably tell a really, really great joke. He just seems like was probably one of the funniest people to be around too.
without question funny. Oh man, on the floor funny.
Yeah.
Because he's just unique and his perspective was unique and he had impeccable timing. So, yes, constant laughter while you're making a movie, while you're not making a movie, while you're around David. It was just hilarious. So, yeah, you look back on it. For me personally, everyone's experience is their own. It's I guess surreal would be the perfect way to put it for me. And I say, like, I jumped onto a bullet train that was already plowing down the path when I got into David's universe, and I jumped off the bullet train, and I look back on it all now, and it was nothing but blissful experience.
Well, thank you, Neil, so much for joining me on this discussion. And
Thanks for having me.
Be sure to follow him on X here at Neil Edelstein, and he's going to be posting a lot more cool things. He did previously. He talked about the behind the scenes on the Lumiere film, but there's going to be more stuff coming. It seems like on your account, and I look forward to whatever you end up releasing in the future, including your Ring book if you decide to do that. And it's just a genuine honor and a pleasure to have you here today. So
it's an honor. Very much. Thank you.
And
an honor to talk about David Lynch. I appreciate it. Pleasure.
Well, thank you everybody for watching. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And we will see you soon. Take it easy. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.